Good morning, everyone. It's morning for me. I've got my coffee. I'm ready to go. um, so hi. Looks like there's a handful of people here already. And there's already some questions in the chat. So I'm just gonna get started. Um, and if you're here, feel free to leave a question. I will go through them in the order that I see them. And if I accidentally skip you, feel free to ask again. All right. um, so this isn't really a question, but someone says they feel that their writing is bland and doesn't sound motivated. I don't know if I have suggestions for this, but sometimes it can be good to just sort of throw ideas off of another person. And also, it's always good to have other people read a draft of your statement of purpose once you finish it. Um, both people that you think can give you advice, for example, your letter writers, or just your friends, maybe other people that you know who are in graduate school already. What are possible answers for why this program in the statement of purpose? Good question. So there are a lot of possible answers to this. Probably the most common one is because of the faculty there. This might vary a little bit depending on what field you're in. So if you are in like a more lab based discipline, this is the case for a lot of STEM, social science, where like advisor fit is very important because you're going to be working very closely with an advisor. Then that is a very common reason for why this program is, because there are faculty who are doing the things that I am interested in. Though even if it's not a discipline that is highly collaborative with your advisor, the kind of research that the faculty and the department do is still an indicator of the strengths of that department, like the kinds of things that people know, the kinds of advice you're going to be able to get. Um, so like that is sort of the most obvious and the easiest way, I think. Um, you know, there also might be reasons that are very personal to you that you can choose to disclose or not. I would just try to make sure that it's not the only reason, right? So, for example, um, if you like absolutely had to live in Colorado to be close to family, I think it would be fine to say something like, I was really excited to see that there's such a great program in this area in Colorado because I really wanted to move there to be close to family. But make sure you can say those other things as well. Um, so someone is asking um, about whether you should disclose that you applied to a program previously and were rejected. Um, I think that's what you're asking. Uh, you said how to cover it up. So you are not required to disclose. Like they might know, they might remember you, they might have some record keeping system that would let them know. But I don't know why that would be perceived negatively. I mean, if anything, like, wow, this person really wants to come here. Um, but also don't think there's any reason you need to mention it. So yeah, I don't see any reason why you would need to mention it unless it's relevant to something like in your statement of purpose. If you were if you corresponded with someone, like if you previously corresponded with a faculty member and you like have an email chain with them, um, they might remember you and you might want to reach out again and tell them that you're applying again. But yeah, I don't see any reason why you would have to tell them that. Um, oh, someone just said thank you. You're welcome. Let's see. So someone submitted their application and found that there were some minor mistakes in their statement of purpose, and asked if there's anything you can do. So, like, when you say minor mistake, like you found a typo or something like that, like I would not be concerned. Um, if it's something that you like seriously think that you need to correct, like you could always email like say if there's an admin in the department, or like where, maybe there's like a graduate administrator or something like that whose contact information is there, you could always email them, um, and ask if you could replace it. But honestly, if it's minor mistakes, like I just wouldn't be concerned. Um, and also minor mistakes aren't going to be okay. So for example, almost every year we get an application with a statement of purpose where someone says the wrong university in the statement of purpose. Like, it'll say, "I'm so excited to go to University of California, Berkeley instead of University of Colorado, Boulder," or whatever, right? Like they clearly are applying to multiple places, sent the wrong statement of purpose, right? Um, that has never been like a reason to reject someone. And so actually when this has happened in the past, so once they just like said the wrong university but mentioned the correct faculty, right? Like they said like, "Oh, I wanted to work with Casey," but they just said the wrong name of the university. That was no problem. We just ignored it. Like, clearly it was a copy paste error or whatever. Once we got what was clearly the wrong statement of purpose entirely, and so the problem was we didn't know like which faculty they wanted to work with or anything, because they were talking about faculty at other universities. um I don't I suspect that we're probably unusual in that we did this, but our admin emailed them and asked if they wanted to replace the statement of purpose because they clearly just sent the wrong one. Places that get a whole lot of applications, honestly, they're probably not going to do that for you. But again, but like in in cases where people have even done that, it's been fine. So I wouldn't stress about it too much. Okay, someone says doing a master's at a top university and grades are average, um, but taking uh, PhD level courses. Do you think you should try to explain your GPA, or would it? So you're saying that your GPA is lower because you're taking graduate level classes. So one thing is they'll be able to tell that by looking at your transcript. Um, but if you're taking graduate level courses, I think that is a very good thing to mention in a statement of purpose. Like that you're already taking graduate level courses. And that's one of the reasons you want to go to graduate school and you're looking forward to learning more and that sort of thing. Um, I don't like I I wouldn't write in a statement of purpose like maybe my GPA is low because I'm taking hard courses. Like I don't think that would help you. But I think that you could mention that you're taking graduate level courses because that on its own could help you. Someone else says you are working and where you're working is not related to the graduate program you're applying to, so how can you relate it? You don't have to. Uh, Lots of people have lots of different kinds of jobs. Like if you if you were in the perfect job for what you want to do, you wouldn't be applying to graduate school. Probably. Um, so I don't think there's any reason that you like have to try to make that connection. You just need to explain why you've decided that you want to get a PhD. So someone has a letter writer, that's your strongest writer, and so they'd have your letter ASAP 2 weeks ago and they still haven't sent it. When is it due? If it's not due yet, then they're not late yet. Um, Faculty have often have a tendency to do things at the very last minute, because there are many, many things to do, and so sometimes you don't do them till they're on fire. um, so I wouldn't be too concerned unless they're like coming right up on a deadline, and so you might email them again like the day before the deadline or something like that. um, let's see. Letters of recommendation from profs without PhDs. Well, their recommendations look good. Um, I think you should get letters of recommendation from the people who can best speak to your potential as a PhD student. I don't know that I would do also, this is gonna depend a little bit on your discipline, because there are some disciplines where there's lots of folks who have, you know, non-terminal, or who have, terminal degrees in the field and that sort of thing, um, that isn't a PhD. So I might not I you might not wanna have every single recommender not have a PhD, but I don't think that's really an issue. I mean, um, sometimes people even have, like, not like, lots of people have people who aren't professors, for example, write letters of recommendation, though I tend to to suggest that at least one, is a professor. Um, but you should just get the best letters of rec that you can. It would be better to have a really good letter of recommendation that speaks the right things from someone who knows you well, than, like, someone that you don't really know at all and can't say anything about you regardless of how famous they are or whether they have a PhD or not. Um, does the reputation of the university of graduation matter in getting a PhD abroad? Um, uh, i- People might so people will give you different answers to how much the reputation of, say, your undergrad university matters. Um, I personally think that it shouldn't matter very much, because where you go to undergrad is dependent on a lot of things that have nothing to do with your potential when you're finishing. That's my opinion. Um, but but other people would tell you differently. The the other thing is, like, there's nothing you can do about it, right? Like, there's some things where you can worry about whether they matter or not, but there's nothing that you can do about it at all. So it's not, it's it just is what it is. But I can just tell you that for a lot of people, that is certainly not the most important thing in an application. Someone has attended a conference online, but you didn't have a participant certificate, should go in your CV. So it's not actually so if you just attend, so you're not presenting, you're not, like, officially doing anything in there, you're just attending a conference. It is not typical to put that on a CV. At least I don't tend to see that on CVs, unless, again, unless you were presenting something, or if you were a student volunteer or something like that. But not, like, conferences attended is not a thing I tend to see on CVs. That said, I think that you could add it. Like, if you've seen my video about CVs, one of the things I say is, like, you can put whatever you think will help you on it. And so I think that if you have a conferences attended section on your CV, then you should put conferences attended. I don't see why it would matter whether it was online or whether you got some kind of, like, certificate for it. The other thing that you might do is mention this in your statement of purpose. Like, one of the reasons that you are so committed to getting the reason you're so sure about your PhD path is because you had the opportunity to attend these conferences and to interact with other people in your field. Question about a statement of purpose. Most universities don't mention a word or character limit. How long does a long statement of purpose hurt your chances? Um, it might depend on what you mean by long. I tend to suggest not much more than 2 pages. Uh, I occasionally see a 3-page statement of purpose. That's fine. I don't know. I would not go longer than 3 pages, probably. And I don't know if there are norms that are different in different places or for different disciplines or whatever. That's just what I've seen. Is sort of standard. So I mean, will it hurt your chances? Like, I don't see why. I mean, uh it just might mean that there's something about it that's outside of the norm, like you're giving too much detail or something. um how much do university oh wait oh yeah, how much do universities know about top schools in other countries? I don't know the answer to that. But if someone cared about the reputation of a like if reputation of the university was something that someone really cared about, then they would find out. So, I mean, I guess the answer to this question is going to vary greatly. How clear a research project are you expected to have when you're applying to a PhD program? This depends a little bit on where you are applying. So my understanding is that uh, especially outside the US, and I think especially Europe, it is customary to have a research proposal as part of your application. I don't know a lot about that, so I'm not going to speak to that, but when you have to do that, I think it's very clear that you have to do that. If you're just talking about how clear of an idea of your research interest should you have in a sort of typical statement of purpose, again, this might have slightly different norms disciplinarily. I tend to, like, in my field, I think it's very important that you have a sense of your research area, and maybe you have examples of kinds of things that one might do with interest in that area. But I think the important thing is to just not seem too rigid. Like, if the risk, if you seem way too rigid, is that, like, you're like, I want to study X, and here are 3 studies that I plan to do for my dissertation. Someone might read that and say, oh, that's like not quite what I do. Or, oh, I'm not, like, I don't know how good, like, it's just easy to see that not fitting into what someone is already working on or what their expertise is or whatever. Whereas if it's zoomed back a little bit, so I think, so I have so my video on statement of purpose talks about this a little bit. And I think the way I talked about it was like, you can't be too vague. So you can't, like, apply to a computer science department and be like, I want to do computer science. And you probably shouldn't even apply to a computer science department and mention just a subfield. Like, I want to do human computer interaction, like, still too narrow. Like, you need to at least be able to narrow it into, like, a research area that faculty in the department could see how it might fit there. So, like, maybe you're interested in, like, AI bias. And so you might say, something like, I'm overall, I'm very interested in AI bias. For example, issues of recommender system fairness, or, um, you know, uh, social media curation algorithm, something like examples. Because you also need to be able to uh, think about how what you're interested in relates to faculty or labs in the department. Um, and so that way, if you're zoomed out a little bit, you could potentially fit multiple places, which is ideal if that's possible, even if there's a very clear person who should definitely, like, be your advisor. Does the name brand of the undergrad? Oh, I think I already answered this. I hope you were there. My answer to does where you went to undergrad matter is, for me, no. For some people, yes. And there's nothing you can do about it anyway, so it's just good for you to know that it doesn't always matter that much. Sorry, sometimes it's just, like, scrolls down for me and then I lose my place. Let's see, where were we? Pros and cons of doing a 2-year master's before a PhD versus a 5-year combined program. Well, so one thing I would say, so I'm wondering if you're thinking about in the US or outside the US, because outside the US, this is a little bit different. Like, you get a master's degree and then you get a PhD and it's shorter. In the US, and I'm like, is this true for, this is true in my field. This is true in all of the experience that I have. Is like, you can get a master's degree or not. It can be good to get a master's degree. PhD applications are often stronger from people who have master's degrees, though unless it's specified otherwise, and my understanding is that in some humanities disciplines, they tell you you have to have like an MA first. But unless it's specified otherwise, a stronger application isn't by virtue of having a master's degree. It's because the things that you do in your master's degree make your application stronger. Like you're more likely to have more research experience. You're more likely to have, letters of recommendation from faculty who had you in graduate courses and that kind of thing. So they do tend to be stronger. So certainly getting a master's degree is a thing you can do to improve your application. That said, some people have just as strong applications without a master's degree. But often in the US, having a master's degree doesn't mean that like your PhD takes less time. Sometimes it does, but not. But like, so I guess I'm saying like it's not. At least in my experience, it's not a choice between like get an MS and then get a shorter PhD or doing them both at the same time. It's just like whether you get an MS or not, and then the PhD programs you'd be applying to would be the same. But again, this might be different in different fields. Someone's asking if folks who are applying for PhD programs from India could connect with each other. Feel free to use the comments on my videos to try to do that if you like. What if one of my recommenders won't submit their letter in time? Does that mean the application will be rejected? It would not mean that in my department. I cannot tell you how other admissions work. There are some places that get just like an absolutely enormous number of applications, and they might be stricter with application requirements in terms of like trying to cull the stack. Often it's not too much of a in my department, it's not uncommon for letters of recommendation to be a bit late. And so the risk is just like, how fast are they going to start? Are they going to start looking at the applications? Because if they start reviewing them and a letter's not there, they can't review that letter. We tend to like look back later, but like there's always some possibility that it's not in when they start looking at applications, and that's sort of the risk. It doesn't necessarily mean it gets thrown out. It just means that letter couldn't help you. But again, this might be different in different places. And I would just encourage you to make sure, I mean, again, it's probably not going to hurt for it to be a little late. But like if for some reason you think they're definitely not going to be able to get it in, it might be worth considering if someone else could write you a letter. But as I said before, professors especially tend to do things notoriously last minute. So I wouldn't like worry just because they haven't turned it in yet if it hasn't hit the deadline yet. Someone was a reviewer for a conference. Can you put it on your CV? Yes. So it is fairly common to have a list of your CV of reviewing that you've done. Like typically that's under service. So things that would go under a service section on a CV are like, I was a student volunteer at a conference. I was the treasurer of our graduate student association. I was on this committee, and here's a list of like venues for which I've reviewed papers. If that's literally the only thing, like one time you've reviewed for one conference and there's not even anything else to put in a service section, you sort of might think about whether you want to have a whole section for that or not. I can't really answer that for you, but like it's a fine thing to put on a CV. Can I explain the difference between a statement of purpose, a personal statement, and a research statement? So one question I have is like, are there any programs that require all three of those things? Because that would surprise me. So I'm not sure that I can totally answer this question. A research statement, I mentioned this earlier, but I tend to hear about those being more common outside the US. It also could be a disciplinary thing, but I've never seen these before. This is not a thing that we do in my field. My understanding of a research statement, or like a research proposal kind of thing as part of a PhD application is that it's essentially a proposal for like the very specific kind of research that you want to do. Maybe that is combined with a personal statement, which would be more like, you know, why do you want to get a PhD and why do you want to go here? A statement of purpose tends to be sort of those things combined, but without as much research detail. So I have a video on statements of purpose. That's all I know. Um, I don't have a super good like if someone requires both a statement of purpose and a personal statement, I don't actually have a really good idea of what the difference between those two would be. If I had to guess, it would be that the statement of purpose would focus more on research and the personal statement might focus more on like why do you want to get a PhD? But I don't know. I've never been involved with a program who asked for a personal statement before. Should you talk about yourself and your work, um, or your research interests and its significance? Both. Well, I mean, yourself, like we don't want your life story. um, it should be, and if you all haven't seen this, like I do have a whole video on statement of purpose that is sort of the best advice that I have. I mean, I guess the 30-second version is that a statement of purpose should say um, what you're interested in, why this is what you want to do, and why you want to be in this particular program are sort of the main things. Is it okay to apply for two different majors? Um, so I assume you mean like two different PhD programs. So like um, applied psychology or wait, psychology and human development. Anyway, okay. Oh, you're asking about different schools. Oh yeah, that's totally normal. Sorry, I should have just read the whole thing before. Yeah, so you 100% should apply to more than one program. Um, the reason that I say that, I mean, unless like you are absolutely sure you will get like if you have been talking to an advisor or something and they have told you like there is a 100% chance you are going to be accepted into this program, then fine. Or if you can't go somewhere else for some reason, like let's say that you have to live in a particular city because of your family or whatever. But if neither of those things are the case, you absolutely should apply to multiple programs. And the reason is because even if you are the most awesome applicant on the planet, like best PhD application anyone has ever seen, there is still a possibility you would not be admitted into a program because of like bad timing. Like it could be a capacity issue. It could be the only person who does the kind of research you want to do is about to retire, or they're going to be on sabbatical next year, or they're at capacity for PhD students, or maybe the department's like out of funding. Like there's all kinds of things that have nothing to do with how awesome you are. And so for that reason, it's a really good idea to apply to more than one place. And then if you get into more than one program, um, then you get to decide which is the best for you. And that's the best position to be in. So the thing that might constrain it is like application fees and stuff like that, and that is totally legitimate. And you should figure out, how many applications you can reasonably do. I thought you were asking about applying to different programs at the same university, which you actually also can do. Um, it might sort of be in your best interest to like talk to someone in each program and see if you can figure out which might make the most sense because they might just tell you. Um, but it's not like I don't think it's a bad thing to apply to more than one program, even at the same university. You just might want to be talking to someone. Um, how many? So this follows up. How many programs would I recommend applying to if I'm worried about not getting in? I, so there's so I really can't answer this question, unfortunately. I'm also one of those weird people who only applied to one place because I had to be in a particular city. So I haven't even personally had experience with this. And I've seen, in terms of students who have applied to or come into our program, I've seen everywhere from people applying to just like 3 or 4 places to like 15. Um, Also, different fields have a vastly different like number of possibilities. Like there's a very like I'm in information science. There is a finite number of information science programs. You could easily it would you could easily apply to like every sort of big info sci program in the United States without much trouble. Um so I can't give you a number. Um but I could tell you that you should only apply to places that you would actually want to go. And so the question that you should ask yourself for every place that you're applying is, would you rather go there or put it off for a year and like try again next year? So you probably have your top choices, right? And so for every place you apply, would I go there, or would I rather wait and try again to go somewhere that I would be more excited about? And if the answer is that you really want to go, then don't apply there, right? Like don't waste your time and money and their time. Um that said, if you're concerned about not getting in, and you don't want to, you don't want to wait, you don't want to try again, you don't think anything about your application is going to change, and then um you should consider a range of whatever you perceive as difficulty of acceptance, like prestige or size of the program or whatever it is. But I don't know. That would be a different number for everyone. um, a professor that you intended to work with helped you edit your statement of purpose and said it looks perfect, um, even after it was 3 pages. Will this affect your chances? um, so I guess, since I was talking about this before, I guess you're saying it's more than 3 pages. Like, I mean, if you got advice from someone in your field and they said it was fine, then like I'm sure it's fine. I wouldn't worry about it. Um, is it important to have a publication for MS admission? Okay, now you all get my publication rant. I was actually just tweeting about this again yesterday. Okay, here's the thing about publications. Um, having your like being an author on a published paper is an indication of a certain type of research experience. However, you would have that exact same research experience, like you could have that exact same research experience without the publication, right? Like, because for example, maybe it's under submission, maybe it hasn't been written yet, but it's still the same thing. Like nothing magical happens, for you as a researcher, like the day after a paper is accepted versus when it's under submission. You still have done the exact same work. um so that's one reason why I think that publications shouldn't be the indicator. The other reason is that some people don't have the opportunity to be an author on a published paper. Um, and that's because, like, maybe they do an amazing, like, their own research project for like a senior thesis or whatever. And it's like super awesome. And of course, it's not published yet because they just finished it. And also, you're an undergrad, you don't know how to do that. And if you weren't collaborating with a professor, why? um, and so it just seems a little silly to me that, like, someone who like did data collection on a project that, and they're like in the squishy middle of a 10 author paper, like just because that paper is published, that somehow has more weight than like someone who led their own project as an undergrad, but it's not published yet. Uh, so like, so that doesn't make sense to me. Um, to me, it's the experience that's important. So you may have like the research experience that you have, the thing that you've done, whether that was in a lab, whether that was in a class, whether that was somehow on your own, um, that's what matters. Now, everything I just said, I am very aware that not everyone feels the same. And every year people tell me that, like, they've heard that there's no way of getting into X program unless you already have publications. I'm just telling you that A, that's not true everywhere, and B, I think that's stupid. So I If you have publications, that can be great, but sort of like I was talking about with respect to a master's degree, like not necessarily by virtue of having the publication, but because of what it means. People who have publications often have stronger applications, but it's not because the paper is published, it's because they tend to have more research experience or whatever, right? So you also might look at people like if you went on, I don't know, the grad admissions subreddit or whatever and did a poll and was like, were you accepted or rejected from PhD programs and did you have publications or not? You might see that data and be like, oh my God, you have to have publications to get into a PhD program. But that's not the case. It does tend to co-vary, but I don't want anyone to think that it is impossible to get into a PhD program if you do not have publications yet. Um, okay, sorry. It scrolled down. I lost my place again. Just a moment. Graduated from a British university in Egypt, and some programs waive the English requirement, but others do not. Should you submit the application without the component, or will it be ignored? You should ask. Anything where the question is, I do not have this component of the requirements, whether it's like there's some, like let's say there's a GPA minimum or GRE scores are required or some English language proficiency test. If it is listed as a requirement and you are thinking of submitting the application without it, ask first. So for example, at my university, that is a requirement set by the university. The department has no control over it. So anyway, the point is ask for anything that's going to be outside of the requirements. You emailed the profs, but if you replied, can you apply to schools where you didn't get a response? Yes. Yes, you absolutely can. So one thing I would say is if you emailed someone and they never responded, you should follow up once. If they still don't respond, I would not take that as like explicit discouragement because it could be that this is like a department or a person or a field where like reaching out to people ahead of time is not a typical thing. It could be that they didn't see your email. My email is a complete disaster area. I miss emails all the time. I am like really trying my best, like, but it's very like you would not believe the number of emails that I get. So it really might not mean anything at all. And as I said, like in my video about reaching out to potential advisors, it's more of a fact-finding mission for you than like something that you have to do. So I wouldn't let it discourage you too much. That said, like, if you're trying to decide where to apply and like, you can only apply to so many and there's some where you like got good responses from people and some where you didn't hear anything, you can certainly take that into account. But I would not assume that it is explicit discouragement. Seen people put a link to their website on their CV. Would you go to the website and take the content into consideration when looking at the applicants? I have a feeling that is going to vastly depend on who's doing the reviewing, how many applications they get, that kind of thing, right? There are some programs that get like just a massive amount of applications. So my answer to your question would be, you should assume that they might, because like you want to make sure that if someone did go look at your website, that like it's something that you want them to see. But certainly do not assume that they will. Had an interview discussion with a potential advisor and she agreed to work with you. Does this increase your chances as she's chair of the department and also in admissions decisions? Sure, of course that increases your chances. I mean, anytime that you talk to someone who's like, and they like who's a potential advisor or whatever, and they say like, oh, I would love to work with you. Like, yes, your chances have been vastly increased for sure. So that's really good. I mean, is it a certainty? it's probably not a certainty, right? Because there's like, the way that different departments work, there might be a limited amount of funding or like a limited number of lines for students. Like you can only accept so many students. And so in those cases, like that it's you still might like fall below. So like who knows? So it's not a certainty, but certainly it's a very good sign. Is it so? Someone else asking about an IELTS score being below a minimum. Is it safe to apply? So of course, you can apply. You can always apply. Does that mean it'll be auto rejected? I think it's going to depend on the program or the university. If you are, for example, not wanting to pay an application fee for something that might get auto rejected, then you should probably ask, like, do you consider applications if it's like your dreams, like maybe they won't notice, maybe they won't care, like who knows, but yeah, so I can't really tell you either way. Can you mention professors from different departments for interdisciplinary research? You're applying in a CS department. Can you mention other profs at the same university? Okay, very good question. So typically, you need to figure out in the department who could be your advisor. And you're in CS, so I feel like fairly confident that you have a similar experience, sort of what I've dealt with. So you need to make sure that there is a potential advisor in the department. Now, this could potentially be affiliate faculty or courtesy faculty, depending on how the university works and if that's a thing. If there's a list, it's usually called, again, affiliate faculty or courtesy faculty. Sometimes what that means is that those are professors from other departments who have an affiliation with that department such that they can advise PhD students. Not everyone has that. It also might mean different things. You could always ask. But there has to be someone who can advise you. And that can't be someone in another department, and except for in those cases in which they have some kind of affiliation. So make sure that you mention people in that department. But you could always say something like, one of the reasons that I'm drawn to this university is not only, blah, 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 your research and people in that department, but also I see the potential for learning from and potentially collaborating with, scholars in other departments, for example, blah, blah, blah. That just shows that you did your research. But you should make it clear that you know that, like, we have gotten applications for our PhD program before where there's a list of faculty at the end and none of them are even affiliated with our department. And that's not good because it suggests that why are you applying to this program? Why aren't you applying to their program? Or that you just didn't do your research. The PhD program you're applying to has an option for a master's on why is that beneficial if you're already getting a PhD? Some people think it is, some people think it's not. I didn't bother to do that when I was getting my PhD, but that's because I already had a master's degree. In our program, sometimes students do that, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just cool to have another degree on, and it's kind of automatic. You don't really have to do anything special except apply to graduate. So it's possible that if you were getting a summer internship or something that they would pay you more if you had a master's. I don't know. So yeah, and usually when this is a thing, you can either do it or not, but it's usually not extra work to do it. I don't know if that's always true. That's how it is at my university. In your statement of purpose, you mentioned professors across multiple departments. So since the application is only to one, it was, I think I just answered this question. So I think I just answered your question, but to follow up on that, if so, like, let's say you apply to the computer science department and you do just what I just said, which was like, I also would be interested in learning from and maybe collaborating with Casey Fiesler in information science. And let's say that I'm not affiliated with computer science in any way, like you're applying to a program. Um, almost certainly. Oh, I got an unstable connection message. Hopefully I'm still here. It's still okay, good. So hopefully that answered your question. Feel free to ask for clarification. Is it too late to email professors regarding advising capacity for December 1st deadlines? It's never too late. You may or may not get an answer in time. But it's it's fine if you want to go ahead and still. I got 2 emails this morning, so. Recommenders have asked you to prepare a draft for letters of rec. What is the best way to start writing them? Ugh, I hate it when people do that. I mean, I understand it. Like, I totally understand why people do that. But I kind of think it's just too much. Like, you don't know how to write a letter of recommendation. You don't know what the norms are and what they should be like. And yeah, so but a thing that you might okay, but the way to think about this is maybe like you're like you're not writing the letter and then they're just going to sign it and send it. I hope not. Instead, you're like filling in like the meat, right? Like, what are the things about you that would need to be in a letter of recommendation? Like, Casey was pursuing an undergraduate degree in psychology, and she was working in my research lab and did a project that was about X, Y, and Z. The thing that makes me uncomfortable about letters of rec, asking you to write them, is like saying nice things about yourself. Like, I can't imagine trying to do that. Like, Casey has a great work ethic, and like but like if they really do want you to write it, then like you should, say the nice things about yourself. You might also ask them like, do you have an example of a previous letter of recommendation you've written that I could see? Or like just fill in sort of the factual stuff and then give it to them and say, I wasn't sure what else I should say here. And maybe they'll fill in like the nice things they say about you. Currently speaking to potential advisors, what's the best way to prepare for such an interview? I have a video about this. It goes through like types of questions you might be asked. I mean, the main thing is, I guess, be prepared for the sort of obvious questions, which is, why do you want to get a PhD? What do you want to do? Why do you want to come to this program in particular? And if you're talking to a specific person, then like look and see, what kind of research they're doing now. I'm not like, don't go like read their most recent 5 publications. I think that's not necessary. But just try to get a sense of like the kind of stuff they're doing now. How to explain why you want to go to that school or that program and what makes you a good candidate. So as I was saying before, like the easiest, most obvious thing to do is it's because of the faculty in that department or the specializations in that department. Like, it fits what you want to do. There are people who do these kinds of things. These are people you want to learn from and collaborate with and be advised by. And what makes you a good candidate is that those are the things that you want to do. 2 questions. How does one define research questions? And is a writing sample optional? Should be submitted. So our writing sample is optional, and like some people submit them, some don't. It doesn't tend to make a huge difference either way. I can't think of a time that like someone's writing sample made a huge difference. I mean, if you're concerned that there might be some like let's say that you have English language proficiency scores that are not stellar, like maybe you submit a writing sample, or like maybe it's a paper that you've written that you think is like really great. So I don't think that I have ever negatively read not submitting a writing sample before. I don't know if that's the case for everyone, of course. And how does one define a research question? So unless you're writing a like research proposal for a place that requires that, I don't know that you need to like formally articulate a research question in your application. It should be it's probably going to look more like a research area. Because the way to think about a research question is like a thing that can be answered by doing research, like or like doing particular research. Like you tend to write research questions for a study, not like an entire PhD. I mean, your dissertation tends to have research questions, but like you don't know what your dissertation is going to be when you are writing a statement of purpose. Again, this might be, there's sometimes slightly different norms in different fields for this, so that might be a good thing to ask someone, like, is it typical to like articulate a very clear research question? How a PhD committee work? Do they accept or the professor you're mentioning in your application? That varies. Some places have an admissions committee where like other professors aren't really necessarily involved. Some, it's very dependent on whether a particular professor wants to advise you. Sometimes it's a combination of both. So you're just not really gonna know. What could be one of the reasons you would not be given an interview? Does research experience is research experience a deciding factor? So, this is the same. So, every time I do one of these, people will like give me their statistics and be like, my GPA is this, and my research experience is this, and here's a school I went to. Do I have a chance? And my answer is always yes. Like, of course, like everyone has a chance. Strengths can always make up for weaknesses. And there's also a lot of like randomness involved. So the question of like, but also applications should absolutely be considered holistically. Like there's all kinds of things that matter for an application. Yes, your research experience is one of them. Maybe your GRE scores is one of them. Maybe letters of rec is one of them. Maybe just the type of research that you want to do is one of them. Like that can sometimes be really important if you're thinking about advisor fit, for example. So all of these things matter. And it is unusual for there to be something that is like this one single thing is like an absolute deal breaker. I think that would be unusual. Can I put library membership as a professional affiliations? Do you mean like you're like you have a library card? That must not be what you mean. Do you mean like you're like a member of ALA or something, like like a professional organization or something like that? Sure, that kind of thing can certainly go on your CV. I mean, really, like anything that you think is relevant can go on there. Like, there's not rules. So things that you think make it look better, as long as it's not like weirdly out there, I think is totally fine. Oh, all right. So maybe some schools do require personal statements and statements of purpose. I would hope that if that was the case, they would tell you what that means. Like, I would hope it wouldn't just say write both of these things and then it doesn't tell you what the difference is. I'm sure that someone else knows the answer to this. I just have never been involved in any program that required a personal statement. So I'm sure that like if you Google the difference between a personal statement and a statement of purpose, someone who knows more than me has like said something about it somewhere. How competitive is my information science program? I don't really know how to answer that. In term, like one of the things about my program is that we are very small. Like we have a small number of faculty. And so we do like, admit less students than qualified applicants that we get, just because like each of us can't be advising 10 PhD students, unfortunately. I hope we like get more faculty because I would love to have even more students. That said, we only have about 50% yield too. So by which I mean all the students that we admit do not decide to come to our program. How important is a social media presence for PhD applicants? Not important at all. I can't imagine why that would be. I mean, the only reason that like having a social media presence might be like if someone happens to know you ahead of time because of social media, or like maybe you got good advice or something like that. but I don't think that a social media presence is ever a requirement for anything. Like, sure, it can help you in certain ways. You could consider it a form of networking, um, but it's certainly not any sort of requirement. And I would never tell someone that they like have to be on Twitter. um, Regarding MS program before a PhD, um, considering both paths because you fear if you start a PhD, you may realize it's not for you. Um, oh, yeah. So that's the other thing. Okay. Reasons you might pursue an MS before starting a PhD program is a, maybe you're not totally sure you want a PhD. That is a very good reason to do an MS first. Another one might be because you think you're not competitive enough as a PhD applicant. It could certainly help. Um, Another reason, so someone asked about like getting an MS along the way. Another thing is like, sometimes people realize that a PhD is not for them. You should never think this going in. Like I will tell, do not apply to and go to a PhD program knowing that you don't want a PhD and that you're just planning to stop with your master's degree. Like that is unethical. However, there are lots of people who start a PhD program fully into like thinking that they want a PhD and then realizing they don't. Right? It might even be like this happened twice when I was a PhD student with like classmates of mine. They went and got a summer internship, like doing, UX research or something, and was like, oh my God, I love this. This is awesome. This is my dream job. And I could have this job right now. Why would I finish my PhD? That is a thing. That is a thing that happens. And so it's like usually when that happens, assuming that it's not way too early on, you can leave the program with a master's degree. Is it advisable for someone else to thank you? You're welcome. Is it advisable to contact your potential advisor while in the process of waiting for admission? I guess my question would be why? Oh, the professor who has accepted. Well, if it's already, if they, how do you know they've accepted you if it's still admission process? Okay, I'm going to assume that what you mean here is like you've already reached out to a prospective advisor. You've already talked to them. They told you they think you're going to be accepted and now you've applied. Should you follow up with them? I mean, I don't think you have to. I don't think it would hurt if there's something for you to say. But if it's like you've applied, there's not really a need to be like, I've applied, when am I going to hear back or something like that. Like I don't know if that's good. Like it's not gonna get you much. Should you drop an email to someone telling them that you applied? If you've already been talking to them, sure, like just dropping them an email and saying, I just wanted to let you know that I did decide to apply to this program. I think that is fine. You have a low GPA, should you still apply if you're if the program has an average of 3.7. So again, application should always be considered holistically. Strengths can always make up for weaknesses, and so I tend to assume, that nothing is a deal breaker. And if your GPA is low, maybe there's something else about you that's awesome and makes up for it. You met a professor at a conference and they introduced you to a professor you're interested in. Should you mention that in a statement or would it sound unprofessional? I think you could say something like, my research interests are X and I'm really excited about the work going on in this department. For example, Professor Y does this, and I was even more excited about applying to this program once I had the opportunity to chat with them about their research at this conference. I think that would be fine. How often do students get co-supervised by multiple PIs? This is a thing that happens. I have no idea how common it is broadly. In our department of like 30-ish PhD students, I think like 3 or so are co-advised. Sometimes also people start out co-advised and then sort of like go in one direction or another. Um, I don't think that there's a need to mention that in your like because so typically when you're talking about faculty in your application, you're not saying like I applied to this program because I want to be advised by this one person. Um, because typically you want to mention more like you can be clearly enthusiastic about a particular person's research, but like you should also be talking about other people as well, or at least mentioning. And so I think that, you know, if your dream is to be co-advised, then like absolutely mention both of those people. But I don't know that there's a reason to like say I hope to be co-advised by X and Y. Like that's a thing that can always like come out later when you're talking to people or whatever. Um, do I think that most people with doctorates feel stressed out by publish or perish? Um, worried about the pressure to publish with a PhD as you want your focus to be more on teaching. Well, you know, if you're applying to if you so if you start a PhD program and your interest is more in teaching, then that then and you're going to seek teaching positions, then like publishing is probably less important, so you won't need to be as stressed about it. Um, you know, they're like yeah, it's a different type of like academic job application, like applying to be a tenure track position at a research one university, you know, for a research based professor position than it is to apply to, you know, to be an instructor or to be a professor at a like primarily teaching institution. It's just different kinds of things, and the type of and the publication expectations would be very different. I mean, like, do I think people are stressed out by publish or perish? Sure, people are stressed out by publish or perish. You know, but I think it depends greatly on what kind of environment you're in, and how comfortable you feel in your like. I have never been super stressed. I mean, like I have published a lot and I've done a lot, but but it tends to not. I was not motivated by fear of not getting tenure for the most part. I was motivated by like wanting to do stuff. And I felt very supported by my department. Like I didn't think that there was like, yeah. So it very much depends on the environment that you're in. What is a writing sample? Some applications require writing examples. Usually this means like a paper. It could be a published paper if you've written one, but as I said before, I don't think that publications are like a thing that every PhD applicant does or should have. It could be a paper that you wrote for a class. It's, you know, it's just like some type of academic writing in your field. Oh, someone got into a PhD program. Congratulations. um, so there's another question about English proficiency scores, and I'm afraid I don't know the answer to this. Like I said, these are requirements set by my university, so I just know what they are, but I don't completely know what they what they mean. Um, sorry, miss my place again. Scrolling back up. Working in academia for the last 10 years with a master's from 2012, looking for PhD opportunities. Oh, the question here is, does your age matter? No. I think it shouldn't matter. I don't see any reason why it would matter. We have had multiple PhD students in our program who are 40 or older. I mean, I'm obviously not going to tell you that it's absolutely not going to matter to every single person. Like I can imagine some reasons why someone might like really inappropriately, stupidly think that it should matter, but in my experience, I don't see any reason why it would matter. How do you incorporate multiple interests into your statement without seeming unfocused? Okay, and you're asking about like matches with multiple advisors. So If you are interested in multiple advisors, there is something that they have in common, right? Like it's not like you're going to apply to say a computer science department and say, "Well, I really want to do robotics or theory or computer science education." Unless there's some way that those things fit together. Like it's probably like you want to do HCI, and you're kind of interested in social computing, but you're also kind of interested in interface design. So like you can pop it up to whatever level it is, that like what is the thing that they have in common. Um uh, I guess that would be my advice. And the other thing I'll say is don't pretend you have some interest that you don't. Okay? Like maybe there's a program that you're applying to where there really is only one person there that you want to work with. That is totally valid. um and that is a thing that happens, particularly for like small departments like ours, where there's not like there are people who have overlap, but there's not like two people who are doing the exact same thing. um So you shouldn't feel like you have to like pretend that you have an interest in robotics when you don't, just so that you can mention another faculty member. Because what if like someone reads that application and they're like, "Oh, yep, here's a person for this," and you get accepted to go work with the roboticist, but you have no desire to do robotics. Like, right, like you should be truthful in your statement of purpose, not only because it's good to be truthful, but because you don't want to like go to a PhD program to do a thing you don't actually want to do. Um so, if like let's say that there is like the one person that you're especially interested in, you can talk sort of mostly about that and then mention some things on the periphery that's like, I can also see how, given my interest in X, I could really learn from and potentially collaborate with, this person who does this thing and this person, that sort of thing. Um, oh my gosh, I've never gotten spam on one of these before. Hold on, let's see. Uh, There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Is it a problem for statements of purpose to be above the word limit? No one's gonna put it into like a word counter. Uh, so if it's like 50 words above the limit, nobody is gonna know. Oh, thank you, Faye. Uh, yeah, that I've never had to deal with that before. Sorry everyone about that. There was a spammer. Um, yeah, so no one's gonna like actually check the word count. But that said, if you go too far over it, it's gonna be obvious, right? So like if you're gonna go over it, it should be enough that it's not gonna be obvious. Um, what's the best way of rescinding a PhD offer that you accepted? Uh, okay. Well, first of all, okay, so let me say two things. So I don't know what your situation is here. So the answer to your question is telling them as soon as possible is the correct answer. Um, and it is completely up to you whether you disclose the circumstances or not. Whether you decide to and how you do this might depend on whether you think you might want to go there in the future. Like, are you deferring? Like, are you like, I can't do this now. Can I please defer for the next? But the point is, be honest and do it as soon as possible, because there might be someone on a wait list. When you say got accepted to another school that you love, let me just give you all a more general piece of advice. Do not accept an offer until you know that you are not going to go somewhere else. um, this is the reason why, and this is in the United States specifically. So I don't think that this is universal. So I don't know how this might be handled in other countries, but in the United States, you are well, okay, assuming that universities are part of this, like, I don't even know, in some kind of organization, they require this. Um, they're not allowed to require you to give an answer to an admission decision before April 15th. Um, and so you should wait until you know where you want to go. Like, you should wait until you get all of your admissions offers, and then decide. Because it is not great to accept an offer and then rescind it. And again, sometimes there are special circumstances, but if it's just like, oh no, I got a better offer, because your offer might mean that someone else did not get an offer. So you should just wait. It is, and the other thing is, so it is kind to tell them as soon as you decide. And it is kind to decide like as fast, as quickly as you can, knowing that you should take the time that you need. Um, One of your recommenders can only write the letter in Chinese. Although it could be translated, you're nervous about how well he could answer the questions. Oh, that's it. Ooh, this is it. So I'm not totally sure what to suggest here. So I think that it should be totally fine to have a translated letter. I think you should say that it's translated somehow. Can he answer the like if there's a form that like requires, sometimes letters of recommendation, like you upload a letter and there's also like questions that they like. I don't think that it would, I mean, you might want to ask them, like, could someone help them? Like, could someone help them do this? I also don't think it would be like unreasonable for you to, if no one else could do it, for you to help them like submit the letter. Yeah. Can you defer an application by 6 months? That is going to be, that's going to depend on the program. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not. But you should always ask if there's something that you like that you need to do. Is it worth mentioning fellowships you've applied for in your SOP? Sure. For example, like in the US, sometimes people will apply for the National Science Foundation GRFP, the graduate thing, before they apply to PhD programs, because it's sort of how it works and how many times you can do it anyway. So I think that mentioning in your statement of purpose that you have a pending application for that is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, because it shows that you've thought through a research project. It shows that you have some initiative, that sort of thing. How best to talk about a conditionally accepted paper? You should just say that. I also think, so I've been thinking about this recently. I've been trying to decide whether PhD applicants should put papers under submission on their CV. The only reason that I can think of that would be a reason to not would be like anonymous peer review stuff. Like, what if someone on the admissions committee is one of the reviewers of this paper and they recognize the title? Like, I feel like the odds of that are really low, but that's kind of the concern that I could imagine. And I know, sometimes I see this and sometimes I don't. You can always, so I think it is perfectly acceptable to mention this. I think that it's also probably fine to put it on your CV, but you might want to ask someone in your field, like, if that's a normal thing to do. How far can good letters go for making up a low GPA? Anything good can make up anything bad. Would be my answer to that. Some people consider GPA differently. I also tend to look at patterns in GPA. Like, if your GPA is low, is it because like your grades in every class were always low the entire time? And what does that mean? Is it because like you had one really horrific semester? Like, if I saw a low GPA and like they had high grades and one horrible semester that dragged it down, like I would basically like completely discount that. Like, clearly something happened, not a thing we should worry about. Or like grades like going up steadily and now they're good, like that, so those kinds of things can matter as well. I feel like it's risky to mention one potential mentor. But sometimes they ask for you to choose one mentor lab. That's one, really? That surprises me. That seems like a bad idea. um, our application asks you to name 3 faculty that you would be interested in working with, which has been very helpful for us actually in reviewing applications to have that extreme. Because the other reason we did that is because not everyone watches my videos. Not everyone knows that like mentioning specific faculty in a statement of purpose is a useful thing to do. And so like every year we would get statements of purpose where no one mentions any faculty at all. And so we just don't know who would be good for them to like. Sometimes we could figure it out from their research interests, but like anyway, it's a good scaffolding. So it would surprise like only asking for one person seems strange to me, but if they ask you, you should answer it. And pick whatever is the right answer for you. Do I know if Steve Boyd is planning to accept? You should email him and ask. um, Current. I mean, so this would be my answer for anyone. You should you should email them and ask. So like for example, I've been telling people that it is less likely than usual that I will take on new students next year because I'm going to be on sabbatical next year. Steve is not on sabbatical next year. He's on sabbatical this year. So if you do not get an email response from Steve, do not be alarmed because he is on sabbatical right now. Current research at undergrad is different from what you want to study. How should I approach this? So it's totally reasonable to that like you might be doing something slightly that you might want to do something slightly different than what you're doing now. So the best advice I have is that like in a statement of purpose to sort of explain why this is what you want to do now, right? Like a little bit of a journey from there to here. What you want to do is often more important than what you have done. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about like filling out forms with your recommend, like I think the thing of like your recommender does not speak English is like a very special kind of situation. Again, I would see if someone else could help them. Maybe like there's someone else, like another professor in their department or something like that. But that feels like a very like specific kind of situation for me. If a manuscript is 90% complete, could you put the journal you're aiming to submit it to in a Sure. Yeah, okay. I thought you were about to say on your CV. So don't put stuff on your CV that's not written, that's not finished yet. But yeah, you can this paper is nearly finished and we're targeting it for this publication, I think is a totally reasonable thing to put in a statement of purpose. Wow, I have gotten to the beginning. Does anyone else have more questions? We scroll to the bottom. So feel free to keep asking. I can go for another 10 minutes or so if there's more questions. Send out emails to professors currently on sabbatical. If you express interest to work with them, how would they decide while on leave? When faculty go on sabbatical, they do not disappear off the face of the earth, I promise. Like I am still like the person that I just mentioned that's on sabbatical, I still have a meeting with him and students every 2 weeks. Like we don't just like disappear. We don't stop advising students and that kind of thing. And so like if someone is going to consider like taking on new PhD students for the next year, they're going to pop their head in and help with admissions. Like they're not people on sabbatical tend to be slower at answering their email, for example, often because they set some boundaries. But like if there's something that's happening in their department that they need to be helping with, like they'll do it. So let's see. Let me see if there's anything like last general words of wisdom that I want to offer here. I mean, I think so, one thing is like, I know this is very stressful. Sucks. Once you submit your applications, all you can do is wait, and that also sucks. And I don't really have like advice for that except like exercise self-care and in whatever way makes sense for you. Okay, and there's more questions. I thought if I talked for a little while longer, some might pop up. Found more faculty are interested in working with. Is it too late to email them? No, it's not too late to email them. Uh, just know you might not get an answer in time. And also, it's totally fine to mention faculty in your materials, even if you haven't like emailed them. Of course. Tips for writing diversity statements. Not really. Um, I haven't thought a lot about this at the PhD level. Like, what would I? So, we've not had diversity statements required of PhD I find diversity statements. I understand their purpose, but I think sometimes they can be a little problematic. Like, particularly for someone who like is from a marginalized group, for example, it feels a little bit like performing your yeah. Uh, um, yeah, I don't know that I have super good advice for this. I mean, one way that these kinds of things can work is like how you will contribute um to like inclusion and diversity efforts in the department or in the field. Um, and so that might be one way to think about it. I'm sure people have given advice about this. It just isn't something that I've thought a lot about because we haven't done this as part of our PhD admissions. And actually, like even when I was on the job market, this was not really a thing yet. But if I were to write a diversity statement, like for a job right now, it would probably be largely about my research and my experience like teaching and mentoring students. Is it better to contact a potential advisor yourself or let professors with whom you did the research um, with recommend you? Do you mean like should you ask someone to like emails? I mean, I think I would ask them, like the professor that you're working with now, you should ask them this question. Hey, do you think that do you think that I should reach out to so and so? And then they'll say, yes, you should do that. Or they might say, no, that's weird. You shouldn't do that at all. Or they'll say, actually, let me make an introduction, right? So I would just ask them whatever they think is appropriate. Um, how to talk about long-term goals in your statement of purpose when you don't have any. I mean, your long-term goal right now is to get a PhD. So your long-term goal is like, what is the research I mean, I don't think it's necessary in your statement of purpose to say like what you want your career to be, unless like if you know that like the reason you're getting a PhD is that your dream is to do X, Y, or Z, that's fine. But I don't think that's a thing that you have to say. Um, what is my opinion of online PhD programs? I don't really know anything about them. I mean, I know there are some PhD programs that are online that have poor reputations, but I assume that not all of them do. So I would not assume that like something was bad just because it was online, though, for sure. Um, should having had a convoluted journey to wanting to do a PhD be detailed in your personal statement? How personal can it be? Um, you should um you should only say what you are comfortable saying. I do not think that it is necessary at all to reveal personal things about yourself, even if it's relevant. Like, unless like, if there's something that you want to this is a very hard question to answer in the general, and you should not like tell me here more specifics, but you might get advice from someone else like in your life. Like, for example, a thing that I have often recommended is send a copy of your statement of purpose to your letter writers, because A, it will help them write your letters, and B, they can give you advice. Like, maybe you shouldn't put that in your statement of purpose. But you should never feel obligated to disclose something personal. And well, yeah, and as Faye says here, like you probably like you also shouldn't feel obligated to like participate in the oppression Olympics either as part of your personal statement or diversity statement. Do you need to identify a larger goal or problem that you want to spend your life working on to sound convincing? No, not your life, just your PhD. You should talk about your research interests in your statement of purpose. That's the way that you should think about it. Is it okay to be very technical in your statement of purpose? I guess this depends on what you mean by technical. Like I can't imagine a statement of purpose. Like I'm actually having trouble imagining what a technical statement of purpose would be. Like you should be talking about your research interests. So if your research interests are very technical, you should describe them if that's what you mean. Um, is it okay to update the admissions committee via email if you submit a manuscript? If you submit one, I mean, like I doubt that kind of like I find it highly unlikely that the difference between like say getting an interview or hearing from someone and not is going to be whether a paper has been submitted, because you've already like if it's that important, you probably have already talked about the research, right? So like the same thing that I was saying before about how publication shouldn't be the thing that matters. um if you've had a paper accepted, like, or like now you have a publication you didn't before, like you could, I mean, I don't know that anyone like would really like I don't know that would make a huge difference. But like if you really wanted to, I think you could. But that's the other thing. It's the kind of thing where like if you got an interview, then you could talk about it as well. Um uh so like you will have the opportunity to update people on the goings on for you if you like get contacted by someone to talk later is also another way to think about that. Um does technical jargon help the SOP? Um I am not in a field in which people would be using a ton of technical jargon. Like I can imagine in some fields that might be totally normal, so I just don't know the answer to this. Um, after you accepted an offer, you realized you don't know if it's what you want, or if you're in a place to pursue a PhD. How do you approach this without burning bridges? I mean, I think you should be honest. You might ask if you can defer, for example. Um, or you might I mean, I think like you obviously don't want to go into a PhD program just because you feel like you said yes and now you have to. So you should have a conversation with someone about it, I think. And I think you can be honest and polite and be respectful of their process and time and all that. Like maybe the solution is that you do a master's degree in that same program instead of a PhD or something like that, or maybe you defer for a year. But you'll need to have that conversation with them. Is an accepted um, is an accepted paper to a rank? So someone says like I don't know the answer to this. Like, is X kind of thing? Is it X kind of published paper well considered? So like I've said, I don't think that like having a publication is you know a requirement. And so same thing with like where stuff is published. Like it's the work that you did that matters. Also I have no idea like what a rank B conference is. um how important is it to include a letter of recommendation? It will be required or not. And if it's required, you have to have it. And if it's not required, there's probably not even any way for you to submit it. So yeah, so that's an easy one. um is it bad to use a lot of listing in your SOP? um I don't know. I like I don't I'm neutral. My reaction to this is neutral. Should you mention the Zoom meeting you had with a potential advisor? I think so. I think I said something similar in response to someone else's question earlier. Like, I think it's fine to say something like, I'm really interested in this department, and I'm and after having the opportunity to speak to blah 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 after their I'm even more excited, that kind of thing. I also don't think you have to. um Do you need to mention specific research goals or just the area you wish to explore? I think an interest is fine. You can also sometimes give sort of, more specific examples if you need to. But like there shouldn't be an expectation that you like know what your dissertation is going to be, when you're writing a statement of purpose for a PhD because you don't know. um Most professors say they have no research positions available. How do you determine beforehand the availability without waiting? So this is why I say that like reaching out to prospective advisors ahead of time is a fact-finding mission for you. Um, so the best that you can do is email people and ask. And like if they really do know that they're absolutely not taking new students, it is a kindness for them to tell you that. um and you may or may not hear from them. And it's just like there's unfortunately not really an answer to this question, except it seems like what you're already doing, and that's kind of the best that you can do. Um, Applying to a PhD program in the graduate manual lists the requirement of a digital portfolio that does not have a place to upload. Um, Email someone and ask. um, yeah, if there's somewhere in the application stuff it says you need X and there's no way for you to give them X, then you should contact them and ask about that. Um, all right. Last, and this is going to be my last answer. I told myself I'd give myself an hour and a half, and somehow it always seems to work out to exactly that amount of time. If you're interested in a particular topic and one faculty member is currently accepting students for that domain, should you only mention that professor? I think so. If there is a particular thing that you are super interested in and there's one person who is doing that, I think that you can emphasize that thing. But I think and also and if there seriously is absolutely nothing else you would possibly want to do, then like don't pretend that you do, right? Like don't like be like, oh well, this person does this, so I'm gonna say I'm interested. Like don't do that because then you might have to do it. um but I think that you can there might be things that are related where you can mention that in a less emphasized way. I would also be interested in, learning from or collaborating with, or, like you can, I think there's a way you can write it where it makes your interest very clear. But that if you still want to like make it clear that like you did your research and you know about other faculty, there's a way you can probably mention them in like less emphasized ways. All right. I think we're done. Well, for those of you who are left, um, I wish you the very best of luck. You are welcome to leave comments on this video or others. I sometimes I miss them, but I try to answer YouTube comments when I can. And if you are watching this later, uh, um, same thing. Feel free to do that. I might do one of these again next month. I mean, a lot of applications are due, early December, and so I'm not sure how helpful it is to do one of these like during the waiting period. So I might wait until maybe like early January to do this again because that is because that's like when people start hearing back or like having interviews or whatever. Yeah, exactly. So like I was thinking like early January. Um, all right. So this question, I think I just answered this. Like if there's only one faculty member who's doing that topic, like I think you can write in your statement of purpose and like emphasize that topic is totally fine. All right. Well, good luck, everyone. And I will maybe see some of you next time. All right. Bye.